Limbaugh talking to a caller. Professor Esposito, you've said that Islamophobia needs to be taken as seriously as anti-Semitism. Talk about these clips, what the right is saying, and the hate it's whipping up.
Well, I think it's very clear what's happening here. Note how Rush Limbaugh talks about the Ku Klux Klan. So he's equating what? American Muslims and the vast majority of Muslims in the world with the Ku Klux Klan. What's clear here is a notion of collective guilt and punishment. Let me begin with just a brief quote from an American Muslim who's also a prominent professional on this issue. It's a matter of principle and not the personalities involved. They may be doing it for all the wrong reasons, but we're being attacked simply and only for not knowing our place, not being sufficiently sorry for a crime we didn't commit. It's like we need to assume some collective guilt for 9/11 and act accordingly. And I think that when you see people, for example, Newt Gingrich, here's somebody who's old enough from the South, can remember the problems of racism and civil rights. He also is reportedly a Christian. In fact, some reports say he's a Catholic. He's got to remember how a theology of anti-Semitism led to a history of pogroms that ultimately led to the final solution. And much of that was based on collective guilt, let alone what we did to the Japanese. The fact that folks can say the things that they're saying now, and that media will often publish them, they would use words that media would never allow if one were talking about Jews or African Americans today, and most probably Italian Americans. What we're seeing is the tip of the iceberg of a social cancer that's been growing in America for the last decade.
Rabbi Kula.
Yeah, I actually agree. I think very important. When you hear terms like those folks, in other words, forget about the tropes using Nazi Ku Klux Klan, because that is so clear. The more subtle, very dangerous language is when a very important politician, we're not talking about Newt Gingrich, we're not talking about some low-level congressperson, we're talking about someone who has a global stage and is considered an intellectual heavyweight within the Republican Party.
Who will possibly be running for president.
When he uses words like those folks, well, wait a second. Imam Faisal and his community aren't those folks. They had people who got killed in the World Trade Center, because actually those folks live in that neighborhood, which happens to be our neighborhood, called Lower Manhattan, called New York, called the United States of America. And that is incredibly insidious, even more insidious than the tropes of Nazi and Ku Klux Klan.
You lost family in the Holocaust.
Amy, this is
I lost
Keith.
a lot of family.
Can I dive in here?
Yes. Let me just hear Rabbi Kula talk about the Holocaust for 1 minute, and then we're going to go to you, Congressman
My father
Ellison.
came here in 1938 from Poland. He came here to escape the Holocaust. He came because of for religious freedom. And here we are, you know, my father's 81, and he's watching this and can't believe this. Because if you, and this is where the professor was right, just take out the word Muslim and put in the word Jew, and you see that this strain, which has always been a part of America, and especially when things get tense, and especially when people are under tremendous stress, and we are, it's very easy, right, to blame somebody. And now it turns out, you know, Muslims are getting blamed.
Since 9/11. Since 9/11. We're carrying the cross.
Right. Since 9/11.
We're going to go to break and come back. Congressman Ellison, we'll go first to you. This is Democracy Now! We're talking about the controversy swirling around the Islamic Cultural Center that is planned to be built in Lower Manhattan. We'll be back in a minute.
You place the world on your shoulders and fight the good fight. Justice makes your heart pound and your fists shall always rain. Over and over
Brown-Eyed Warrior by LAL here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Anjali Kamat. Our subject for the hour, the controversy that is is increasingly raging, not only in this country, but around the world. Our guests are Talat Hamdani. She lost her son, Salman, on 9/11. He was one of the emergency responders. Rabbi Kula is with us. Rabbi Irwin Kula is president of National Center for Learning and Leadership. John Esposito teaches Islamic Studies at Georgetown University. And we're joined by the first Muslim elected to Congress, Keith Ellison. He's from Minnesota. Congressman Ellison, you wanted to jump in here.
Yeah, I wanted to allude to the point that you just made about the world audience. I mean, the world is watching this controversy. Everybody is sort of wondering what's going to happen. And, you know, I guess my question to your guests, and I'd like to hear your views as well if you can share them, what does the rest of the world think about this? What do people who want to have a recruiting script to make war on the U.S. Think about this controversy? What use do they make of it? When you hear some of these outrageous statements that American politicians and cultural leaders are making.
Well,
so for example, Brian Fisher.
Go ahead, Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher says there should be no more mosques built in America. Some of the outrageous things that Limbaugh and Gingrich have said, Palin. What does the rest of the world think about this?
Last month, Tennessee Lieutenant Governor Ron Ramsey questioned whether Islam is a religion at all and suggested the Constitution's protection of freedom of religion should not apply to Muslims. Ramsey made the comments while campaigning for the state's Republican gubernatorial primary race.
Now, I'm all about freedom of religion. I value the First Amendment as much as I value the Second Amendment, as much as I value the 10th Amendment, and on and on and on. But you cross the line when they start trying to bring Sharia law here in the state of Tennessee, in the United States. We live under our Constitution, and they better be living under our Constitution. But it's scary if we get there. Now, you could even argue whether being a Muslim is actually a religion, or is it a nationality, way of life, or cult, whatever you want to call it. But sir, we do protect our religions, but at the same time, this is something that we are going to have to face.
That was Tennessee Lieutenant Governor Ron Ramsey. He is running for the governorship of Tennessee. Your response, Congressman, let me go to Professor Esposito.
Let me just make a point here following up on Keith's comment. The way this plays out overseas is that to our friends in the Muslim world, which are the vast majority of Muslims, people are stunned. And it feeds a concern about, as that has existed before, that there's a double standard. That is that, on the one hand, we're admired for our principles and our values. But on the other hand, there's always been a sense that we say we stand for democracy, we say we stand for pluralism, a freedom of religion. All of these things, as the Gallup World Poll shows, vast majorities of Muslims admire. But significant numbers of Muslims around the world believe that there's a double standard when it comes to how Muslims themselves are actually treated. On the other hand, it plays in to the extremists. The extremists wind up saying, in effect, see, at the end of the day, to be a Muslim is to be persecuted. There is a clash of civilizations. And I think that that's what's ironic. And it's underscored by something that you and others said earlier. The problem here is not just that you have some rural rednecks who are making comments. It's that you have people who hold responsible positions. I'm not even going to say that they're responsible people, but people who hold responsible positions in our society, whether it's politicians, whether it's so-called Christian ministers and others. And the fact that you could have, for example, the pastor of a church that only has 80 people who calls for an event like burning Qurans, and that could then become an international issue and get that kind of coverage, shows the depth of the problem that we face and the urgency about our need to face it.
Professor Esposito, this Islamophobia is not a new phenomenon. Can you take us back over the past decade, really, and talk about the sort of early waves of hate crimes that hit and the hate speech against Muslims?
Well, I think that when you look, for example, at particularly, at post 9/11, you have a wave of hate crimes, but ironically, post 9/11, you have an America that, if you look at polling, responded a lot better than it did after the first couple of years. And I think part of that reason, things got much more negative, was that while President Bush made a very good distinction between terrorists and Islam, at times the Bush administration played the terrorism card so much that it fed into an American population feeling unduly under siege. Not that we don't have to be concerned about terrorism, but unduly under siege. Then what you see over the years are problems of attacks on mosques, but more importantly, the fact that you have people like Representative Kaine and others, you have politicians who over the last decade had played this card, Rick Lazio and others. You have Christian right ministers, John Hagee, Franklin Graham, these ministers saying that not that terrorists are evil, but Islam is evil. And remember that Hagee and Rod Parsley were two ministers who McCain embraced. What people forget now when they look at, as we lead up to the elections, is that during the presidential elections, you could see the Islamophobia in the way in which people were trying to prove that that Obama was somehow a Muslim, as if that should discredit him. And indeed, Secretary Powell had to speak to that. And on the other hand, you had all the major Republican candidates playing the anti-Islam card. And that's simply been picked up now by other political candidates now, primarily Republican, but also some Democrats. So Islamophobia runs very deep. But what we want to do is not acknowledge that it exists. So we even say, well, we shouldn't use a term. And the reality of it is, it's like any form of racism. We need to call a spade, and address it head on. If we don't, this will simply continue to spread.
I wanted to go to the comments of two New York politicians. You just mentioned Professor Esposito, New York Republican gubernatorial candidate Rick Lazio. He was a longtime congressman. He's now running against Andrew Cuomo for the governorship of New York. He vehemently opposes the Cultural Center project. He and many other conservatives have repeatedly questioned the positions taken by one of the project's founders, Imam Faisal Rauf.
You know, the person who is spearheading this effort, Imam Rauf, has said on the very month that we suffered this terrible surprise attack that America was an accessory to the crime of 9/11 and that Osama bin Laden was, in a real sense, made in the USA. This is not the voice of a bridge builder. I know they're trying to portray this now as a situation where we've got peacemakers and bridge builders, but the person who's driving this is affiliated with some of the most radical organizations that we know. He refuses to condemn Hamas as a terrorist organization, and he's affiliated very closely with the Pradana Global Group that funded the flotilla that tried to run the blockade in the Middle East.
Rabbi Kula, you're saying this isn't true?
I mean, some of this just isn't true. I mean, I understand facts don't matter. I get that. I really do understand that. I'm a multicultural, I'm a postmodern person who understands there's multiple narratives. I get it. But that literally is, read the last chapter of his most recent book, Imam Faisal's last chapter. It's about love. It's about a rejection of terrorism. It's a rejection of violence. And it turns out that a piece of the Muslim world is in crisis right now. We know that. And the question is, are we going to lump every single Muslim in the world together? And that's what Rick Lazio is doing, and it's very, very dangerous because it's splitting American Muslims from Americans. That's a very dangerous thing for the country.
Congressman Ellison, he was a fellow congressman, Rick Lazio.
Well, to me, you know, there's this deep tradition of right-wing populism and scapegoating. He reminds me of Pitchfork Ben Tillman. He reminds me of George Wallace, who swore he would